This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Monday. It's June 19th, 2023. And for those of you out there who are celebrating, it's Juneteenth, which is the day, I guess, when in the Civil War, the U.S. Army arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced the slaves were free. At any rate, here we're going to do a lot of the news today. We're going to dive immediately into what I think is probably one of the most important stories, which is the inflation. It's being reported in the Wall Street Journal, and you're not getting much coverage of this on the mainstream media, although the Wall Street Journal is covering it. The inflation is, the world central banks underestimated inflation last year and just pumped money into the economy. And what's happening is we're finding that in Europe, and inflation is still around 5%, which it is in the United States too. Of course, that's how they measure it. It's actually much higher than that for food. Just go to the grocery store with $100, see how much it'll buy you. And the middle class is getting tremendously squeezed around the world. The recession basically is already declared in Europe. Germany is clearly in recession. They have not declared it for the United States yet. We have to get 2 quarters in a row of negative growth. And it depends on how they manipulate the statistics, but I think people are in general feeling the economic pain just simply with credit card debt now reaching $1 trillion, which is phenomenally high. And it looks like the Federal Reserve, which did not increase interest rates this last time, will start again pretty soon. Now, as you know, and as I've talked about, I'm reading constantly these days, and this book I want to recommend to you. We can we'll get a better shot of it in a minute here. Chris will get it pulled back. It's called Surprised Again. It's the COVID Crisis in the New Market Bubble by Alex Pollock and Howard Adler. This is the book right here, Surprised Again. Let me see if I can get it there better. It's hard to see their names, but they're right there. Alec Pollock's and Howard Adler, Surprised Again. Okay, now what they pointed out is that the pandemic, basically the government just opened up the printing press and decided just to print more money. So the Federal Reserve went from about it increased it also. The last crisis, 2008, increased, but the Federal Reserve had a balance sheet of about $3.8 trillion, and that was in 2020. Well, as we came out of the pandemic, 2022, 2023, it's up to $8.5 trillion, which in the short term, it kept us going. I mean, the Paycheck Protection Program, if you remember. We had the CARE Act providing for state and local governments and healthcare providers, subsidies for airline industries. We had increased unemployment benefits. We did all kinds of pumping of money into the economy because the economy was locked down. And that leaves the Treasury with a massive balance sheet of debt. And in other words, these are assets because they're holding Treasury securities, but it's all fabricated. It's all fiat money. And if we just keep printing fiat money, eventually everybody's holding it. You can't just keep creating the fiat money and pumping it into the economy and calling it assets, because there's no hard assets here. It's all full faith and credit of the United States government. And the cost of financing the debt is enormous. So what happens is that we get into these inflationary spirals. You have a built-in crisis, which will be a credit liquidity crisis, because once the credit starts collapsing, and it is starting to collapse, commercial real estate market, we'll cover that in a minute, but the home market with interest rates now for fixed 30-year mortgages about almost 7%, 6.9%, we're going to collapse the economy. And gold, which is now still holding at about $1,900 an ounce, a little bit more, will break out. Now, the fiat currency, as the Treasury continues to print money, and we've got about a $3.5 trillion federal deficit, which is massive. I mean, we've never had deficits of this size before. We're at now almost $33 trillion in national debt, and it's accumulating. This is a crisis for everyone. And I'm going to encourage you again, just very briefly here, I'm going to mention that's why I'm so enthusiastic about working with Swiss America and this Walking Liberty $50. Silver is going to appreciate very, very strongly in this crisis that's coming. And it may not seem like it's coming yet. I mean, you go out, you look at the economy, people are moving around, restaurants people are eating out. But the point is, it is crashing soon. It won't take much to collapse. It'd be like it's a balloon. It's a bubble. It'll burst. And when it does, it's going to be very painful. These Walking Liberty $50, fill out the form, buy up to $250. It's a first-time only offer, introductory, but get introduced to Swiss America. Start talking to them because you're going to need some gold and silver. It's the only thing that's going to hold its value as the dollar depreciates. And I guess the BRICS meeting is going to be in August. There's 30 countries that want to join it's basically Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they want to de-dollarize. They want to move into a new currency. The dollar is very much under threat. When the dollar collapses, we're going to have a huge economic problem. And this week, we've got a publicist. This week, I'm going to start publicizing this book, which is one I've written with Dean Heskin. And it's all about the coming global crisis crash and the gold rush. And I really do recommend you read it. I've got a whole chapter in here on cryptocurrency, which I think is yet going to the casino. The United Kingdom is probably going to be one of the most trouble because the United Kingdom has enormous energy costs and very high inflation. And Germany is already deindustrializing. We're into a huge crisis here. And the story I want to cover next, I think I'll cover, let me go back here and kind of get on my plan, but I wanted to cover this story about inflation as number one, because it's number one in my mind. Okay, now number two, let's look at San Francisco. I watched several videos over the weekend. If you have not seen videos of San Francisco, just find them currently and watch. It has become a drug haven. It's filthy. People with tents all over the city, defecating in the streets, doing drugs, walking, and it's very dangerous because doing drugs, they're buying drugs, and people are coming to San Francisco because the weather's good. It's a beautiful place, what used to be, and you can sleep outside. No one bothers you for doing drugs. The police are not going to bother you. It's a drug-free city. They're purchasing drugs. They get about $850 a month from the city. They spend it on drugs, and they rob and steal from each other. It's a very, very dangerous place. Now, AT&T just announced it was closing its flagship store downtown. Now, look at the stores that have closed in downtown San Francisco. Office Depot, Container Store, Whole Foods, Disney, Armani Exchange, Saks off Fifth. You have Nordstrom's close. The office vacancy rates are about the highest in the city, and the Marxist government won't do anything about it. Marxist government, black mayor says, we don't need your white people's advice to fix this city. Well, it is a city in absolute decline. And the idea of denying that this is Democratic Party decline is ridiculous. Defund the police, open the streets to crime, allow drugs to be done willingly and openly in public. This is insanity. But it is the current woke ideology. At San Francisco, one of the biggest LGBT plus cities in the world. And again, that's in your face in San Francisco. Businesses are closing. San Francisco people are leaving. It's going to be a bankrupt city pretty soon. And it's going to be emblematic of what's going on across the country in other democratic cities. You're going to see cities like Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Philadelphia, all across especially the Northeast, are going to get hit very badly by this. St. Louis. These cities are in desperate trouble. And the real estate, when it collapses and the real estate has to refinance, you're going to find that the banks are going to take losses. And the banks will take losses that will not be able to be passed on to anyone. Banks are going to be stuck with malls. They're going to be stuck with commercial office buildings. And that's the nature of the beast right now. And I do mean the beast. This next story, then I'm going to let Chris comment, but I want to cover one more first, which is that there is this global food crisis developing. This was covered by Breitbart over the weekend, but the Ukrainian farming sector, which this Ukrainian insane war, I say insane because it was democratic, caused again, going back to 2013 with Hillary Clinton and taking money from Pinochet, who was an oligarch in Ukraine who wanted to push Russia out. And Hillary's Secretary of State was happy to do it as long as he contributed to the Clinton Foundation, which the IRS and the Department of Justice. I wrote a book called Partners in Crime. We worked hard to demonstrate the illegality of the Clinton Foundation. No one did anything about it. And then following up on Hillary, you had the next going right into 2014, where you had Obama and the State Department with Soros doing the Maidan rebellion, or one of these color revolutions, which Soros was famous for across Africa. These were supposed to be a liberation movement. They threw out a legitimately elected but Russian-favored president of Ukraine, Yanukovych. They put in their own puppet, and they wanted NATO to absorb Ukraine. Well, now Russia finally said no, trying to negotiate a settlement to make sure that Ukraine would remain neutral, or at least out of NATO. And the war is expanding, so that we are having now this dam broke, which floods all kinds of farm areas and will cause poverty and suffering in the Ukrainian people, even more so than their bombed out cities. But the agricultural sector, there's a report that was just done by the Kiev School of Economics, and Ukraine's farming industry has been severely damaged by the past year of fighting. It will take at least until 2050 for the production of staple crops like corn, oats, wheat, etc., rye, to return to the current levels before the war. And some of them, like barley and sunflower and wheat, probably won't recover until 2040. Some of the others will be at 2050. That means it's going to take approximately 20 years for the Ukraine to get back to its full strength agriculturally. And Ukraine has been one of the breadbaskets of the world. If Ukraine goes offline in producing wheat, etc., the world's going to start to starve. Already the effects are being felt in Africa, and African migration into Europe is increasing dramatically. People can't eat, and they're going to flood Europe with another wave of migration, which is going to further fracture the European Union. European Union is going to be in financial problem as its central banks are as stretched as the Federal Reserve in terms of lending. This credit crisis is unsustainable, and it will be a bubble that pops. Chris, you want to comment?
Interesting there. Again, almost anything being done by these world leaders, I'm exaggerating the point, but a lot of what's being done by these world leaders, especially when it comes to economics and supply, is destroy food creation. Right now, this war in Ukraine, we see what's happening. This was discussed when it started. This was going to happen. We knew it. What happens after that? The World Economic Forum types, the climate change types, are trying to convince farmers across the EU to stop farming. You have, like you covered a little while ago, was it Ireland is trying to slaughter a bunch of cows just to keep them from passing gas, because that destroys the environment, supposedly. The idea is, it just seems like a lot of these things being done by some of these so-called world leaders is to destroy the food supply around the world.
Yeah, there's an article, I didn't post it, but it's on America First Report, which is americafirstreport.com, saying there's 11 signs that humanity is doomed. And I mean, these are dumber and dumber. This is, first of all, Putin is increasingly talking about, and the Russian military are publishing articles about, that they're going to use nuclear weapons, that they've had it. This is a perpetual war that'll go on in Ukraine. It's another like Afghanistan. We'll be there for 50 years fighting. And Ukraine, when it gets weapons supplied by the United States and Europe, and our weapons supplies are way down, the arms dealers are making a fortune, just like during the pandemic, the pharmaceutical companies made a fortune, and they want the war to continue. Well, Ukraine's, Zelensky's on a world tour out there raising money. Who knows how much of it's being stolen? So a nuclear war is increasingly a likelihood. Russia moved tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus last week, and they could be easily used to push back any offensive, or if Russia just gets sick and tired of this and decides that enough is enough, we're on the edge of nuclear war. Or will it be a bioweapon? You got Bill Gates out there looking for every bat cave in the world to see if he can find a new bioweapon to duplicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of that, Chris?
They're just trying to destroy, or at least, again, the permanent underclass. They're trying to create a huge class of Eloi where we're dependent on them for food, for energy, and for everything else. This way they can laugh at us. They'll stick us with a social credit score. I know it sounds far-fetched, but the fact is, this is where we're headed. Watch what happens. Watch what's happening in China. Watch what happened in Sri Lanka. Watch what happened in Venezuela. You're seeing the fruits of what these people want to do around the world. I have one more question for you. Yeah. Which by the end of this year is going to have more letters in it? The new BRIC establishment, or the added letters to the alphabet people here?
Now that's a good question, and I don't know if I know the answer to that, but they're both going to expand. That's for sure. We could
take bets on this one.
Yeah, we could. We could make book on this one. Look, this article goes on. They poison the food supply with biosludge, pesticides, herbicides. We've lost the ability to reproduce, sperm count, and female infertility is just exploding. Birthing centers are closing. Higher rates of birth from autism and infertility, some of which is, I think, vaccine related as well. LGBT is targeting mothers, fathers, and families.
Yeah, it used to be leave us alone. Now it's let's get in your business.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost touch with the reality of money and finance. We're in a never land of imaginary, the new monetary theory, which is you can print as much money as you want because you can always pay off your national debt with more printed money. So we'll just have a $33 trillion coin printed, and that's solved. We pay off the debt with that coin. Yeah, well, I mean, Marx Brothers movies didn't have things this stupid. They were actually funny about it. This isn't funny.
They're also more poignant too. So
yeah, well, I like the Marx Brothers quite frankly.
I'm a big Marx.
Me too. I've always liked Groucho Marx, and the three of them were hilarious. Right. At any rate, then the climate change movement. We've got all these insane movements going on. Carbon dioxide is not the turning knob of the Earth's temperature. I'm going to cover that in a minute. But we're destroying food supplies. We're saying we've got to get rid of farms because of nitrous oxide in the air will damage the planet with global warming. Nonsense. I mean, all these things are part of the natural cycle of Earth, and Earth is right now very productive. We got to be happy we're in an interglacial warming period where plants are growing, where we can grow food, and using our technology and our ability to flourish instead of destroying. We're going to slaughter cows. We're going to eat bugs. I mean, these people are absolutely insane, and it frightens me that we have reduced the quality of education in this country, where we're more interested in teaching about transgenderism to kindergarten kids than the ability to do fundamental math. Our schools are worthless. Kids can't are not taught science. They don't know how to think. They can't read. They can't do math. And you get a population that can't critically think. I don't mean critical theory think, which is Marxism. I mean, they don't basically understand logic. They basically don't understand math. So they can be sold these myths of climate change because they don't know climate science, Chris.
I read a book, oh gosh, was it in the 2000s? It was after Bernard Goldberg blew the whistle on Dan Rather. He wrote a book called I guess it was a 99 or maybe 100 or so people who ruined America, or who are ruining America. One of them was Howard Zinn. And I can point back to the dumbing down of America.
Yeah, I've got his book right here.
Oh, yes. Now, Howard Zinn, this is part of it. The whole dumbing down of America may have started back in the 1910s. We can talk about that. But he accelerated it. Was that that's it, the People's History of the United States. The real downfall started there.
And
because we're not a whole world. The world cannot be summated to oppressors and victims.
Oh, it is. And by the way, he even signed this one.
Oh, great. I have a book that now I have to go back and get, except I have a fake. I have a fake background, so I'm going to go get it while you're talking. I'm going to bring it back to you and come back on.
Okay, go get it.
All right.
I'll keep going. I mean, look, I'm going to cover this next story, which is while Chris is going to retrieve something. The next story, I want to cover several now on the climate. And just to explore what the insanity that we're dealing with in the climate. The World Economic Forum has now come out with this study. They have a huge study, and it's a briefing paper. And what they're saying is basically that we need to re-engineer cities with too many cars, and they are causing climate change. And so therefore, we've got to reduce by 2/3 the 75% of all cars have got to go. That's basic it. Reduce vehicles from 2.1 billion to 0.5 billion in 30 years. So in 30 years, they're going to go to electric, solar, and batteries. They're going to want to eliminate cars. They're going to want to put us into cities where you have to go bicycling and walking, maybe 15-minute cities where you can be turned off with your cell phone. You can't communicate. You can't do anything. If you go outside your 15-minute zone, suddenly everything goes blank. And, this is the World Bank has announced it wants to set a timetable to stop the funding for gas-powered cars. Gas station bans are coming. All these things are absolutely suicidal. If you wanted to put into place a set of economic policies that were guaranteed to destroy modern industrial state, we are doing it. And the Biden administration is leading the charge. Is this whole NeoMarxism, which is what this is set out to fundamentally destroy the United States economy and to reduce us from a world-class power into a confused third world nation in which we're internally fighting on identity politics issues, which are really insignificant. Questioning who's men and who's women. I mean, come on. Is this really a worthwhile debate? Is this really something that's going to advance us? Instead of demonizing white people. Now that's reverse racism. Don't solve that. Martin Luther King didn't want to demonize white people. He wanted to erase race as an important characteristic. And, that I'm in favor of. I don't think we need to be divided by race. I think it's insignificant in terms of who a human being is. A human being is more than the color of their skin. But this is neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism. It's a cultural war against, and that's my second book on this trilogy I'm going to cover here. I'm writing like crazy these days because I'm going back on the social media. I'm back on Twitter. I'm going to start posting more on Twitter. It's my first book on it about energy, global warming, and climate change. And I'm going to cover a couple of sections of this, the next couple of stories here. Chris, if you're back, thank you. The truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, that's in press right now. I go through and show how this is a negation. is designed to destroy the climate scientists, and the climate change movement know their science is junk science. We have the emails from the ClimateGate Michael Mann when he falsified data to create his hockey puck theory. And the data that's coming out and being published these days in scientific journals is largely junk. I look at scientific journals and they're talking about, intersectionality and all these other issues. And I'm saying, time out. These are divisive issues. These are issues which go back to intensifying the anger between men and women. If we break up families and teach children about sex, we're headed right back into paganism. And, if we abandon God and go back into paganism, that's where we're going. And it will not be pretty. Chris?
Agreed, totally. And by the way, here is the book I was discussing as well, or I was trying to bring up before. It's called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America.
Oh, yes. It's a good book.
It's by a woman called Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt, a frequent guest on a program I had back in
I think I have a copy of that. I think I do. Yeah, I have a copy of that.
She goes back as far as Rousseau's social contract education, the idea where the children should not only avoid discipline, but teachers should avoid disciplining children, but avoid giving them, tiresome lessons. They go all the way up through the purpose of Montessori's, through outcome-based education of the 90s moving forward, invented spelling, things like that, Howard Zinn history, that sort of thing. It's really this is nothing new. This is something that has been discussed in Rousseau's time.
It's malware of the mind.
Right.
In other words, once you start thinking this way, the computer no longer works. You've got a malfunction.
Absolutely.
And it's designed to have a malfunction. These are programs which is, if you run them in your brain, you're destroying your life. And the transgenderism, there's going to be a video, I'm sure it's going to be suppressed, just like the Plandemic, which I encourage everybody to watch. Plandemic 3 is very good about totalitarianism. And Jonathan Cain's book, The Return of the Gods. This is all about how if you eliminate God, what comes back is the pagan gods, and the pagan gods worship transgenderism. It was an Babylonians, and he goes back through all the cultures that were ruined by gods like Baal and Isthar and all these other gods that are pagan gods that continuously reemerge once we eliminate Christianity and religions that are, positively oriented at developing human beings under moral standards. These are do whatever you want, you're in charge, have sex, have bizarre sex, and that'll fulfill you. Well, I mean, that's not the purpose of sex. Sex is, procreation. And if we, with viruses and other things, destroy people's fundamental DNA and create structures where watched the video this morning of the rapper who, very famous rapper who died in the middle of his a presentation. He was doing a concert. He fell over on stage and died. I mean, again, the suppression of what the virus, the virus comes from Wuhan. Fauci funded it. We've been funding gain of function viruses for decades. Why are we doing this? We don't need bioweapons. It's insane. And then the vaccines, which don't prevent you from getting the virus, but inject into you the spike protein, which has its own disastrous effects, a lot of them heart problems, blood clotting, etc., and lying constantly, and censorship on top of it. So let's go to the next story here on the climate that I want to cover. So World Economic Forum, we don't need cars. We don't need no stinking automobiles. We don't need no stinking gasoline. Let's get rid of it all. And if we do proceed down, oh, by the way, the UN Secretary General is proposing a global digital compact to push laws against online hate. Well, that means you can't say the truth, because what they consider hate speech is anybody who's proclaiming the truth. Let's cover this one here. Finally, NASA, it was a good story. It was published and showing that, that NASA has known for decades that in fact, there is no climate change because of carbon dioxide. And this is a very good article. It's published on Natural News, naturalnews.com. I encourage people to look at this website. For 60 years, the NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, has known that changes occurring to planetary weather patterns are completely natural and normal. Well, okay. Why do they know that? Well, 1958, which was a geophysical year, as I recall, there were changes in the solar orbit of the Earth, along with alterations in the Earth's axial tilt. And those are going to produce some climate changes in Earth. This is what they call, and I cover this extensively in this book. Now, it's a very difficult subject to get your mind around, but the mathematics of it are extremely difficult. But it's called the Milankovitch cycles. The Milankovitch cycles are predicated on the Serbian scientist who figured this out about 100 years ago or so, maybe more, that the Earth's orbit around the sun is not circular. It is often elliptical, but it varies. In other words, the Earth goes from a circular orbit around the sun, in which the Earth is constantly close to the sun, to where the Earth at the extreme is very far away from the sun. And that's when we get ice ages. Now, the Earth also has an axis which it rotates, and the tilt changes. These are obliquity. These are the concepts are explained in the book. But as this elongation occurs, the Earth increases the amount of cold because it's more of the year farther away from the sun. When it gets at the extreme point, we begin to get ice ages because the Earth does not warm up enough for the winter ice caps to melt. So the Arctic and subarctic ice caps, especially the Arctic, begin to expand. And that's when we get the ice ages covering much of the Earth in ice. And it's going to happen again. And these are not steady changes. The Earth's also the poles switch. We have a change in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. None of these things are stable. The basic conclusion of the article, which is what I read a whole chapter in this book called Sun Heats Earth. You know, if you don't read these things, if you don't understand these things, sure, it's easy to lie. And if you don't have any knowledge to refute the lie, or don't understand why this stuff is just plain nonsense, this, global warming because of the greenhouse gases. If we didn't have greenhouse gases, the Earth would be too cold to be inhabitable. All the radiation from the sun would escape the Earth. That yellow thing up in the sky is not a tree ornament, it's the sun. It's our main source of light and heat. And you can prove that to your friends on the left by saying, at nighttime, that's when it's dark. When it's dark, it's night. And the reason it's dark is because the sun isn't in the sky. The reason the sun isn't in the sky is because the Earth rotates. Now, these are very hard concepts for the left to get. They're much more concerned about cows farting. Okay, so when Milankovitch first put forth his model, and I'm not sure if I get the year when he did it here, but he was writing about these things. It occurred to him almost kind of in a flash, and then he worked it out over years. Milankovitch was a Serbian, and he pretty much calculated exactly how the Earth does go around the sun. Now, when he first put forward his model, it was ignored, and yet by 1982, the National Research Council of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences finally adopted Milankovich's theory as truth, declaring that orbital variations remain the most thoroughly examined mechanism of climatic change on time series analyses of tens of thousands of years, and are by far the clearest case of a direct effect of changing isolation on the lower atmosphere of Earth. That I sum it up by saying sun heats earth. It's really not hard. If we had to sum up the whole thing in one simple phrase, it would be this: the biggest factor influencing weather and climate patterns on earth is the sun. No kidding. I mean, it doesn't really take a genius to figure this out. When the sun is not burning as brightly, when we don't have as many sunspots, we get a little ice age like we did when Napoleon and his troops froze coming out of Moscow, or when Washington was crossing the Delaware. Big ice flows in the Delaware. Delaware doesn't freeze like that anymore. Well, that was not a Milankovitch cycle. It was just the sun was not as hot. It wasn't producing as many sunspots. It was cooler. And the sun cools, the earth cools. Sun heats earth is the fundamental turning knob of the earth's temperature. And carbon dioxide has been decreasing dramatically over geological time. Dramatically. We have many times less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today than we did in geological history 300 million years ago. We can tell this from ice core samples. The science is hard, and you can see that 5 extinctions before there were human beings on the face of the earth. Those where most of every living thing died. That didn't happen because of a little more carbon dioxide. It happened because of cataclysmic changes in the earth. Giant asteroid hitting 65 million years ago, which sent a tsunami all the way up to what is today North Dakota and contributed to wiping out the dinosaurs. A lot of factors which you won't know unless you study a bit about climate science. And if you just apply your mind to it, it is not that hard, but it is easy to be lied to. And we are re-engineering Western society based on what is about as smart as the tulip craze in Holland in hundreds of years ago, where people thought tulips were so valuable they spent their fortunes buying tulips and produced different colors tulips. Well, when that craze died, people found that they're worthless tulips. They couldn't even eat them. So this was a basic human phenomenon of falling for the most crazy idea possible, because it is propounded in a way that psychologically appeals to the inability of the vast majority of human beings to reason, critically think, and to refute an argument. And if they dare to do so, like Galileo, they're basically going to suffer the condemnation of those who do not want truth, but in fact want to use lies in order to enslave people. And that's the period of time we're going through right now. Chris, any final comments?
Yes, tulip mania.
Tulip mania, yeah, tulip mania.
There are quite a few instances in business history where people thought, hey, this is either going to be a great idea or tulip mania. It's either Amazon or tulip mania. There we go. So
Right.
it's the two extremes here and there, but that's what's going on. Again, I urge you to check out the article on not only the one you were discussing before about NASA saying, look, the sun is the biggest factor, but also what's going on with the UN and the World Economic Forum. The idea that they're trying to curtail hate speech. What's been done over the last, 50 to 60 years was normalize the idea that everything that goes against the government is hate. Well, I'm exaggerating that point, but normally the idea that you speak out against the government when they think they're doing something or they're trying to tell you they're doing something good, it's hate speech. You're against taxes, it's hate speech. Apparently, you're a bunch of moms concerned about your kids' education, it's hate speech because
Or racism.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing. So the idea is it's going to evolve even worse. So you're against climate change. It's hate speech. You're speaking again against the UN. Well, the UN's a diverse organization.
You don't like the homeless. You don't like drugs. You don't
Right.
like LGBT.
It's superficial politics, and that's what people seem to understand these days.
These insane ideas do pass, but they're very destructive. And with the power we have today, with nuclear weapons and bioweapons, and economics collapsing, which is going to happen. At any rate, in the end, God always wins. And I want to end by also mentioning My Vital C. Go to My Vital C. People are saying, I've taken this now for 4 or 5 years. Colors come back into my hair. People are saying, I've gone through Mueller. I've gone through a lot of crises in life. And I'm feeling actually younger, more energy, more determined to succeed, more determined to get these things going. And my Vital C, which is a remarkable molecule, carbon-60, and I've written a book on this with Chris Burries, who founded this company. He was working back with the scientists who won a Nobel Prize discovering carbon-60. And this stuff is remarkable. I've got hair products, skin products. I use them all. Dog, cat products. Our cat and dog love them. Try it out. All these buttons, purple buttons will take you right to the site, and you can buy some and give it a try. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. It would help if we get down on our knees and pray and ask repentance that we allowed God to be taken out of our schools going back to the 1940s. That's when this started in earnest. So when God will win here, I just pray that we get through it in one piece. If we all do our part, it only takes a few to fight this. It can be beaten. God will intervene. He has before, he will again. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Monday, June 19th, 2023. We are broadcasting at thetruthcentral.com. Check out our website. We're on a lot of social media platforms.